with Danielle, yes, and I'm going to work my way across. So Danielle Rondeau is a writer and teller of stories. She's trained in the fields of law, psychology, and personal transformation. She practices as a lawyer, life coach, and facilitator, and is the author of the memoir, I Am Enough, One Lawyer's Epic Journey to Fill the Void, the poetry book, Remembering Wholeness, and the e-book, Trash Your Stress. Danielle is the founder of Write Your Soul Story, a movement to reconnect with the soul voice within each of us. She offers individual coaching programs, group workshops, and retreats spanning a wide range of topics, including overcoming addictions, reducing stress, cultivating deep self-love and acceptance, exploring the depths of what it means to be human, and living a life in alignment with your soul. She's passionate about living out her soul story and helping others do the same. Danielle. Theresa, right next to her. Theresa Nicassio is a registered psychologist in Vancouver, Canada. She's a holistic therapist, author, and international media personality who is following her heart to do what she can do to help the world be a kinder and more joyous place for everyone. Her own health journey led to seek further education in many areas of wellness and led her to become a gourmet raw food chef and raw food nutrition educator. Her garden to table book, Yum, Plant-Based Recipes for a Gluten-Free Diet, was the 2015 Best Diet Book in Canada and the 2016 Best in the World winner of the Gourmand International Award. It brought Theresa's compassionate work and integrated knowledge far beyond the four walls of her consulting room. It inspired positivity, creativity, and inclusivity through her messages of hope, health, and empowerment. She's also the host of the Dr. Theresa Nicassio Show with 350,000 plus monthly listeners on Healthy Life Radio, and is the creator of Theresa's Wellness Hub, a free wellness resource for the general public. And if you'd like to win her book, I have some draws. You can write your name and give it to me, and at the end we will draw for her book. She's brought a gift for us all. Our next contestant.
Contestant?
Yes, contestant. It's a game show. You just don't know what you're winning yet. Marilyn R. Wilson. She is a freelance writer, published author, and speaker and editor with a passion for interviewing. Her move to writing began in 2006, when with no experience, she threw caution to the wind and answered a Craigslist ad from a New York City fashion magazine. When they surprisingly accepted 2 of her story ideas, the doors opened to a whole new career. Not long after, she became the co-owner and editor of a local magazine and was writing freelance articles for others. In 2013, Marilyn felt led to pursue a new direction and began working on her first book, Life Outside the Box, released in 2015. This was followed by The Wisdom of Listening in 2018. In her spare time, she also handles social media marketing for 3 companies and does offer support for a publisher as well. Marilyn Wilson. And the contestant on the other end of the panel, Janet Walmsley. She was born and raised in Manitoba. She was a dental assistant and hygienist for 27 years and didn't write a book about it. And then she was the head marketer for a company for 14 years. She's mother of Chris and Jenny, and a grandmother to Maverick, and grandson number 2 on the way in May. She has now an active professional career in acting, including theater for 15 years for film, TV, commercials, voiceovers for the past 10 years. She was nominated Best Supporting Actor for a Comedy at the 6th Annual Indie Awards in Los Angeles. She won the Unlimited Women of Creativity Award at the Unlimited Women's Awards Victoria. And her Janet's unconditional love, perseverance, courage, and strength for her autistic daughter is a testament that autism is no barrier to success or fulfillment. Janet's book, The Autistic Author and Animator, is a best-selling nonfiction book about her daughter Jenny's journey with autism through her eyes. And I must say that Janet and Jenny wrote their first books together and published their first books together. And I believe Jenny is writing another book.
This is a trilogy, and she has one more chapter left in the sequel to it.
Awesome. Welcome, Janet. We have a wealth of knowledge in the room. Okay, I love this question. I can't seem to stop tinkering and wordsmithing specific sentences over and over and over again, rather than finishing and sending out a complete draft. It never feels done. Maybe it never, this is not what the person wrote, but I'm wondering if maybe it never feels enough or ready, right? And even though I know it is an illusion that tinkering never stops, what techniques can I try to push myself forward rather than stay and obsess over what was already written? This is a brilliant question. Good question. And Danielle, I'm going to start with you on this.
Sure,
you probably know that.
I've definitely struggled with that. I think one of my, I have two strategies that I've used to deal with that. One is to set myself a challenge that is visible. So a writing challenge where I have to announce something on social media every day, or to a friend, or at least some form of accountability where I'm not the only person who knows what's going on, and I can't just convince myself that, you know, the sentence needs to be rewritten 20 million times when I could just send it to someone and they'd say, oh, that's a fine sentence, you know. So that's one strategy, is to have somebody who's going to be waiting to hear from you, and if they don't, they'll be able to poke you and say, hey, where's your piece for today? The other, and make sure that the person that you have is actually, you know, that their accountability is going to be meaningful to you. So if it's just a friend who you know is going to stop following up if you don't send it to them after a few days, then maybe you need some kind of greater structure. So for me, it was posting on social media. I had to declare on Instagram or Facebook how many words I'd written today, and I'd post a sign of the numbers and as they went up. So that's one strategy, and the other one to actually get it out of your hands is to have the perspective that it doesn't have to be done the first draft. So if you have an editor, which you definitely should have an editor, know that they're going to give you feedback, and it might come back to you, and you might then rewrite that sentence again. So it doesn't have to be that your sentence right there in front of you is a sentence going to go out the door. And if you can have that perspective, it helps you to kind of let go and at least let it get out into someone else's eyes where you can have that feedback.
Excellent, thank you. Would any of the other panelists like to add to that at all? Marilyn?
I really struggle. I struggle with procrastination, and I also struggle with every time I start for a day, I want to read what I did the day before and fix it. And this is why I have the reading list here, probably the most profound thing that I had said to me in a book I read was simply, don't even look at what you've written until you've finished. Like, get it out of you first. And the other thing is, it's not supposed to be perfect. That's what the editor is paid for. They see things you don't see. They see it in different ways, and you think the sentence has to be rewritten. It could be it needs to be moved to another part of the book. You're so focused on the details, you've worked so closely with it, that you're looking through a microscope, and when you hand it to the editor, they've got fresh eyes, and it's so much easier to deal with their suggestions because they see the big picture where you're looking in a paragraph. So it's been really hard for me to let go, and in fact, I will honestly say I have never read one of the books I've written after I published it, because I know I'll find something I want to change. There never is a point you don't want to do it, but what I read in one of these books recently that I'm going to enact fully is I will not start editing until I finish the book, and then I will start editing my chapters for me, and then it goes, and I work with a professional that helps me see the bigger picture.
I also think we're our own worst critics.
Absolutely.
So we have to give ourselves a pat on the back. I had never written a book before, and I wanted to get this story out, but my mind was going in all these different directions and what I wanted to write. I had to just stop, breathe, believe in myself, be confident in myself, and there was a reason, there was a passion in your heart on why you wanted to write that book in the first place. And we start to get so keyed and so, almost slapping yourself going, I gotta do this and that. We just have to remember always why we're writing the book, the passion behind it, the reason behind it, and pat yourself on the back, take a breath, take a break, and then start.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I ditto all these, and the why. I think that's, when we get caught up in the wordsmithing, then it becomes about us. It becomes about us, our ego, our pathologies, our perfectionism. But the whole writing is, it really is coming from something bigger than ourselves. And that's where if you can step back and you ask the why, and I was thinking about when I was thinking about coming today, that's a big question though, what is my why? And so when I broke it down, I realized that writing is, you were talking about community, it's about relationship. It's about your relationship with yourself, with your material, with your ideas, your thoughts, your dreams, your fantasies, your fears, all those things that, talking about that book today. It's about your relationship with others, and the book is an intimate process of sharing the most intimate part of yourself with this other person. So it's like having sex, right? You don't just, you don't have sex the same way you might masturbate. You're going to have sex with another human being that you're going to be engaging with and being responsive. So thinking about what are their needs? What is it that I want to communicate? What is it that they need? What might help them heal? What might help them see the world differently? So when you get out of the perspective of it's about me, then it becomes easy. It becomes about, what is the purpose of this? And so then the community editors, I have 5, because everybody has their perspective, and they could challenge my ego, and they could challenge my thought, this is the way it works. But they could also help me become more clear about what my message was, because sometimes I was really clear that what I wanted to do or what I was called to do was different from what some of the editors were saying about some things. So it's about trust, taking those breaks, sleeping on it. Remember, it's not about you, and then it gets easy. Then it becomes the wind under your wings. That why carries you.
I think remembering your ego is very good.
Yeah.
Very good piece of advice. All right, I would like each of you to answer this question. Do you have a favorite app or program that you like to use for writing? Janet, what did you write your book in?
What did I write my book in?
Words, Scrivener.
I'm like my daughter. Mine was just all written in a journal book. It was all handwritten. And then after I wrote it, I went to the computer and went to it. My daughter does that all the time.
Typed it in Word?
And typed it in Word, yes, sorry. And then that was it. There was no big, I'm just old school. And that's exactly short and sweet. That's how I did it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Marilyn.
I'm embarrassed by this question. I'm a computer nut, but I love OpenOffice. It's so simple. There's not all the bars and stuff. Everything's in drop-down menu. It's a freeware program, but you can't do the editing process. You have to then move it into Word, a proper Word program to deal with an editor, because there's things they can do. But when it just comes to getting my thoughts on paper, I like it as simple as it can be. So whatever program you're most comfortable in, do it. Then you can copy and paste it into Word for the editing process. But yeah, OpenOffice freeware is my favorite. Every time I get a new computer, it's the first thing I put in it.
Excellent. What did you use?
Well, I mean, for the actual writing, when I just realized, it took me a couple years before I realized that I was writing a book. But I actually, I have to say one of my favorite things, particularly because ideas just seem to come when they come, often at the most inconvenient times, is I like to use the dictation button and email. I'm thinking a thought, and so I just say it in there, and then email it to myself, and then on my phone, and just in yahoo.ca.
I also do that. I dictate things to myself, walking down the street, get an idea. Excellent. Danielle?
I've been a combination of all those things. My main form of writing is just journaling, free journaling, and that's where my poetry and my memoir has mostly come from. But I do more so in the editing process. If I'm working on a particular chapter, I will email it to myself, and then I'll email it back and forth to myself with various edits. So there'll be like a string of 10 emails with different versions of the same.
How do you keep track of versions? Because I get them mixed up if I get too many.
Well, email is good for that because it has a timestamp for each email. I use the note app on my phone if I'm walking, like you say, and an idea comes, but I haven't dictated much, but yeah, just pen to paper. There's nothing that's so cathartic, and I find that I get the most benefit from actually writing it on paper, and maybe because my handwriting's messy, but I can't actually then like critically look at it at the same time. It comes out more freely, so I kind of bypass the analyzing of it, whereas if it's on a computer screen, I can look at it, I can go and edit it, so I like the first cut always on.
And then do you put it into a Word document after?
And then I'll type it up into a Word document.
Okay, so you mostly you use Word, nothing fancy. You're not using Scrivener, or you're just using Word.
Most editors take that. I just wanted to say, somebody was having trouble writing something the other day, and my comment to them was, maybe you do better talking it. And this deals with this. So close your eyes, pretending somebody's sitting across a friend and you're telling them the story, because you want your voice to come through in your writing. And then copy that, transcribe it on paper, because that's your voice. But if you're sitting having a coffee, I'm talking to my buddy here, Randy, I tell a story a certain way, and you get all this stuff in it. So sometimes I think recording things, if you're really stuck on a passage, if you can talk to a friend, even have a friend come over for coffee, turn on your recorder, and tell the story to your friend if that works. Find something that works. But most editors work in Word. There's very few that work in other things. So in the end, you end up at the same place.
Excellent, thank you. We're going to talk about editing now. So somebody here was told that when they're writing, they also need to have an editor editing at the same time. And the question is this true? And let's just were you writing while your editor was editing at the same time, or did you finish the book and then send it to an editor?
I had finished my book, and then it was edited. And unbeknownst to me, my grammar was horrible. They thought maybe Jenny was the book that was going to have, they'd have to do a lot of work with. It was me. But no, I wrote the book. The book was all written, all done. And then we went through the editing.
First write the book, then go editing.
My first book, because each chapter is a mini bio, I asked if I could do that, have them done, and the editor said no. Because they wanted to read the book from cover to cover to get a feel for it, and then they went back and started editing. This is the first time I've ever heard an editor say they would do it differently. Occasionally, again, if you've got like a collaborative book and a different author for each chapter, they'll do them separately. But the editors I've dealt with want to be able to read the book from cover to cover to get a feel for the continuity, and then they go back and start, because if they edit here and it turns out that piece needs to go at the end and they've done it separately, it's not good.
A lot more work for the editor.
Yeah, mine was a little different story, because again, first I didn't realize I was writing a book, and then I realized I was writing a book, and then we had someone for dinner. It turned out was a publisher. It was one, and anyway, worked with that for about a year, and then ended up publishing ourselves. It was the whole story. But what happened was, because the book wasn't done, I had been putting things together. I had the privilege of working with a developmental editor as well. And so that was during that year, it was a lot of that process. So in that sense, but it wasn't the editing of going through the content per se, but it was more the guidance of the strategic. And I was just talking with Lois, my beloved mentor here, who's about to send the book off soon. I'm very excited. But that one of the things was, I didn't want to put my personal story in the book. I didn't feel it was relevant. The book wasn't about me. It was about something bigger. And she's like, no, you have to put about yourself. I'm like, I don't want to. And she's like, and you have to, get on Facebook, and you need to do this. And so it was a very it was the editing of me. It was editing of my vision, and of also guiding me to open my heart in a way, and self-disclosing in a way that I have not. That wasn't what my plan had been, and so so I had reworked on with that, and then I had other editors who did other things, and again, different kinds of editors. That really, and I'd say it's the best money you will ever spend if you're serious about it. So if you can get more than one editor, I say the more different perspectives, the more people can challenge you, the better.
And as you said, different editors do different things. I'm going to let Danielle answer the question, and then we'll come back to what you were just talking about.
I definitely wrote the whole book before I sent it to my editor, but what I thought was the whole book wasn't actually the book I was supposed to write. So in that sense, it wasn't the final book, but it was what I thought was the whole book. And I think, like, the same experience, I don't think very rare for an editor to take a piece of a book and then another piece of a book, because I think you would just, and as an author, you would lose a lot of the value that an editor is able to give you. My story is, a perfect example of that, and I sent the first version of my book to my editor, and she read over it, and there was something in the way I had put it together that she had a question about the fundamental continuity or the thread that ran through it, and when she asked that question, I didn't have an easy answer for it, and it had me actually, go through a process of shutting down and throwing the whole thing away for a while, and then actually writing a whole nother book in a different genre. So, that the value that you get from having an editor see the whole thing together, and whether that actually makes sense, and whether, what needs to be changed. How is someone reading this going to receive it? They can't give you that feedback if you only give them a part of the book. So, yeah, I think it's, at least the value that I've got from an editor has been, to a large extent, related to their ability to see the story that I was trying to tell in its entirety, and then relate to me how that came across.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with her, because that's with mine, because we had to turn sort of chapters around, because I had certain things at the front which she said, oh, that'd be better at the back, and then after I looked at it, I thought, wow, what a whole difference. And then a couple of things that I thought were going to be in part of my chapters ended up being appendixes at the end. And so it was a whole different ballgame, but boy, did it ever enlighten the story and bring a whole different.
I think when they use the term editor, a developmental editor, I've always called it a book whisperer. And at the start of every book I've done, I have a book whisperer, and I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. I send them some sample chapters, or you can talk to them about your idea. But I did a 2-day workshop first, and then worked with her a little bit to fine-tune where I was going in the book. And so if that's called editing, then I can see it. I just wanted, if a developmental editor is what I call a book whisperer, they help you figure out what it is you're trying to do. Where should the focus of the story? Should there be more personal in there? They can deal with a partial or ideas and give you direction. But if you're talking about standard editing where you've got copy, then they want your whole book. So I've never heard of a developmental editor. I invented the term book whisperer to help. And you do that. Melody does that for somebody who doesn't know. She helps you fine tune your ideas and just
for nonfiction only.
For nonfiction only. Okay.
Yes. So I'm just to clarify, there are different types of editing. Developmental editor will take your big ideas and make sure you have them all in the right order, that you're not missing pieces. It will take out things that you really do, that are unnecessary. They'll move things around. They'll make sure the book is marketable to the market you want to present it to. It will make sure that the reading level is appropriate for your audience. There's a number of things that developmental editors do. Then stylistic editors look at the language. They look at your word choice. They look at how many times you start the sentence with the same word, and how many times you use 10 simple sentences in a row, no complex or compound sentences, or every sentence is a chapter is 50 words long. They look at things like that, and they help you kind of polish them and make it really readable. A copy editor looks at, they'll make sure the facts are straight, they're looking at the grammar, they're looking at the spelling, they'll make sure that the quote is on the right page and that the sidebar lands up on the right page with the right piece of information. So you're talking about a topic and you have a sidebar, they're making sure that those are aligned in the right place and they're not like, one lands up on this page, the other lands up on this page, and the reader's like going back and forth trying to find things that are supposed to connect. And a proofreader makes sure you have all the commas in the place, you have this period, if it's spelled words wrong, there are no typos. So just to give you a very quick what editors do. And different editors do different things. Like I only do developmental and stylistic editing. I do not proofread. I would be a terrible proofreader. I have a degree in linguistics and I have no interest in proofreading for comments. Like just none. But there are people who are really detail oriented and they love that work. Right? So the next question is linked to this, and it says, should an author hire an editor before querying? And I'm assuming they're meaning, querying a publisher or an agent. So before you go out and say, hey, would you help me publish this book, how much of the editing work should be done? And I think there are 50 answers for this. So I'm going to ask, maybe starting with Marilyn, her opinion on this. Yeah?
No, I really don't know. I didn't work through a traditional publisher, so I worked through a hybrid publisher, so they worked with a lot of first-time authors and stuff. If you're talking about traditional publishing houses, I don't know, but my assumption is that most places will have their in-set editors that they work with. That would be my assumption. You could pay, so say 50,000 word book, roughly for a decent editor is probably around $1,500.
Are you talking about copy editor, or are you talking?
Well, I haven't worked with that many times, so proofing is extra from that. So if you're going to spend all that money and do your book, what if it does, and you want to go to a traditional publisher, what if they want their editor to do it and their editor sees it differently? So you don't want to pay an editor twice. But I'm just saying this is my guess because I haven't worked with a traditional publisher.
Anyone else want to, I think Danielle had something to say.
I went through the same publisher as Marilyn, but I see definitely some value in the developmental editing before
Absolutely.
you would start writing your book. I work with a coach, and I kind of see that as a similar kind of thing. Yeah, so it's somebody who's going to help you talk through the ideas, to give you reflections on things that don't make sense or how it comes across to someone outside of your head. And those are things that are valuable to have before you actually sit down and write 50,000 words. You might still write 50,000 words and then have to start over and write them again. But I can definitely see value in having that kind of a process before you would write it. The other more detailed forms of editing, I don't think you could. Before you, and yeah, like Marilyn said, I think most publishers, or at least a good deal of them, want to work with a certain editor, or are more comfortable with an editor, or would want to have their editor check it, and so there's cost considerations for sure.
Yeah.
So because I was on the fence, I was working with this publishing company. This publisher, and then I didn't work to get in that initial piece. I didn't know initially, and then after that year, when because it was going to be launching actually the publishing company, the publisher got very, very sick and couldn't carry on. So I was in this place where it was moved to that place of being published potentially with a big publishing house. And so I had to go through a big decision-making process and did a lot of research. Bestseller Blueprint, Harrison and Jack Canfield, they have something called Bestseller Blueprint. It's the best $1,000 you will ever spend in your life if you want to write a book. It's amazing.
What is it?
It's called Bestseller Blueprint. And if you can't find it, you can contact me and I can find the info for you. It's pretty easy though. But anyway, in that process, I was then trying to decide, do I want to do my own publishing? But having worked with a publisher, I also realized that I lost a lot of my personal voice and personal power, and to the point of title that didn't feel integrous to me. Renegade Vegan. I'm not vegan. My daughter was 100% vegan, but I'm not 100% vegan. And so, but they didn't care. And so, but I realized that for me, ultimately, I decided not to go with the publisher, publishing house. But when I was in the deciding process, one of my dear friends, works for a university publishing company here at UBC, and so it was wonderful. And she shared, she's like, this is really good. She took it to, shared with some of the staff there. And, anyway, the whole conversation was they suggested going, if you want to go for a bigger publishing company, medium to large especially, maybe a small one you can query directly. Most of them you have to actually go through agents, getting a literary agent, which if you do use a literary agent, it can take, if you get a top one, it can take years to even get accepted with your proposals. So the quality of what you submit has to be at a high quality, even though a publisher is going to have their own editors and do all kinds of things with your book. So it was very strongly suggested that if I do decide to go that route, it would be wise to hire a copy editor to go through and really in how to present it, and even how to send in those proposals to whether it's to the small presses or to agents, because literally it can take years if you're lucky to get in with an agent, if you're serious about that, and then it takes more years for that to then manifest into the big publishing. So if you're serious about that, then definitely I would say you would definitely want to hire a publisher.
Yeah, that's one thing I found in looking through all this, and I went through what Danielle and Marilyn did. I went through influence publishing as well, because what I found in looking in traditional publishing, you've got to be able to have you've got to have an effective pitch, you've got to have your manuscript, you've got to have it done, and it has to be the best that it's going to be, because they want to see something that's professional and that can be published, and then an editor should have done the work on it. Also, you kind of lose your power a bit with them. Well, you do lose your power because they decide the cover, the title, the design, the format, the price, and there are other things that they're going to change too that you might not want to change, but you've given that over to them. It kind of is different from fiction to nonfiction. Fiction, you need to have it all done, and like I say, you make sure it's the best that it can be. Nonfiction, you give these query sort of letters, which is a 1 page, and with nonfiction, you do it like a business way, sort of like a business letter to tell them what you want your story and book to be about. But you kind of lose what you want to give, and that's why I went the same way Marilyn and Danielle went, because even though with them, you're paying for them to do, your book, to give them their expertise, their knowledge, but you're still being allowed to have your own voice in your cover, your title of your book, and other things that go along with your book. And then if you self-publish, well, you're your own boss, but there are a lot of different things that happen. Can you get it into the bookstores? Can you get it on the shelves of the bookstores? And it's a 24-hour job. So if you're passionate about your book and you're a trooper and you're driven and you work hard, self-publishing, you can do it. You can do it that way. But traditional, all I can say is you better make sure that it's the best that it is, because you could, like Teresa was saying, you could be, that's why I think a lot of people go the way that we went, or self-publishing, because they just get to the point where they're not being accepted, and then some people go and publish it by themselves because they just feel they don't have the money to give out to what they call hybrid self-services. So it's something for your own self. You know who you are. You know what your story and book is about. You have to figure which way is the best for you. Should I go the publisher route? Should I go with a self-publishing company? Or should I self-publish?
And to add to that, if you go through a publishing company, they'll often want to do a first run of your book, which means they'll publish it this year, and then they won't print it again. They're not interested in printing it again. They'll just do the one big push, they'll get it out there, and then they're done with you.
And they own it.
And they may own your copyright. And if they own your copyright, you are in trouble, because that means that you can't go and print your book and try to promote it without their permission and without giving them money for doing that. So when you read publishing contracts, read them really carefully. If you have a lawyer that you go to, I would recommend having that lawyer read the contract.
Or have an agent who can speak
Or have an
for you,
agent,
who's
yes.
a pro at this. And,
Yeah, or have an agent.
And the other thing is, and you can, I did that other talk a couple years ago, which is, you can listen, watch anytime. I have a lot of other tips, but one thing I just want to say is get your own ISBN. You can do it for free here in Canada. You just get your own ISBN, because whoever owns your ISBN owns that book.
And if you're not sure how to do that, ask one of the panel or ask me, and we'll explain it to you. One sec. So what I was going to say was, so yes, if you do want to go the traditional publishing route, beware of all the caveats is one thing I have to say. I do have a few clients that go traditional. I think the best advance I've ever had someone get is $10,000, not what they used to pay out, $100,000, $200,000. I think $10,000. And the clients that get that kind of advance are like, we have written a proposal that just is just amazing. Like, there's just no way you're going to lose money on this, right? Like, the publisher won't do it unless they're sure they're not going to lose money, right? So when you're thinking about the publishing route, start talking to people like the people on the panel. Come and ask people, because it's really complex, and you want to understand at least a little bit of it so that you can make a good decision for yourself. If you are going to go to so I do have clients who go straight from me to a publisher without an agent. There are some smaller publishing houses, not the big five, but there are some of the smaller publishing houses that will take independent authors. They tend to be the type of publishing houses that focus on very specific niches, and that author is in that very specific niche, and that's usually how that happens. So yeah, get more advice on publishing as we go. We're just going to turn to that topic right now.
I just want to say, because I did not understand when I started out how traditional publishing worked. And so my hybrid publisher at that time had distributors in the US and Canada. We had bookstores and warehouses. I paid $500 to put a poster on the wall in a New York book fair with one of them. 300 books were ordered. Everything is ordered on consignment. They do nothing to sell them, and 2 months later, 270 came back. And normally they are destroyed, they're pulped, and you're out the money. And that's why I was lucky my publisher was able to get me to buy them, and I was overstocked. Most of the books in bookstores don't get sold. Most of them get pulped. In 2009, 77 million books worldwide were pulped, unsold. They were printed, sent out on consignment, returned, and sold, pulped. Getting your book in Target, this is a real case study. They ordered 30,000 books at a 60% discount, so the publisher got 40% to divvy up between everybody, and 25,000 books came back and were destroyed. And the publisher and the author had to cover that cost. So the industry is a little scary right now, and when I say, yeah, I'm not trying to get in bookstores, my idea of getting in bookstores is little independent ones through my independent distributor, because he will take them back. But you think, oh great, 300 stores ordered my books, and they're printed, and they're shipped, and then they're returned, and they're pulped, and I'm out the money. So just when you talk about traditional publishers, this is their format, this is what they do. And so they buy your book ahead of time, they own it, you can't print anymore, so it's off the shelves now, they've been returned, you've gotten your advance, so you're coming out ahead. But if your book matters to you, is this what you want happening with your work that you put your blood and soul into? And I had to say no. I mean, I got burned once, and I won't go that direction again unless I'm convinced that at least the books will come back to me, that they're not going to be pulped. 77 million books are not sold every year and destroyed worldwide. That was in 2009.
And somebody pays for this.
In Canada or where?
That was worldwide. I don't have Canadian figures. I was looking in 2017, there were no Canadian figures. Sorry, 2009, 30 to 40% of all books were returned unsold, and of those 95% were pulped. So.
And when you do have the books, when you send the books, you have to pay for them, the shipping as well.
And the printing.
And the printing, everything, and also the shipping back. I did do a couple of Costco in the US, Costco book signings, which were fabulous fun. I didn't make any money. But I think that Costco, it's like 65%. of a discount off of it. Plus, you have to get the books there yourself. So you have to, and then it's a whole thing. You have to label them in a special way. Blah 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 blah. So So before you take those steps, it's good to talk with people. And this is one great thing about this community is that that we're really happy to share what we've learned. A lot of us the hard way, and
Yes.
and then what we do differently.
And like Marilyn, Jenny and I went through the same thing. We all of a sudden heard that our books were stuck in some warehouse, and the covers were going to be ripped off them, and they would be unsellable. So we ended up having to buy those books back. And I realized, some people getting in stores and that. Jenny and I have been extremely fortunate. Indigo bookstores have welcomed us with open arms. And we've done a lot of signings in a lot of stores all over BC. We're planning to do a cross Canada one with them as well. I'm just talking to head office. But I will let you know, in saying that, they do take 45% of your book, each book. However, I take it still as a positive because the contacts that we have made through these book signings, through autistic organizations, teachers, families, not only in Canada, our books are out in Europe, they're in France, they're in England. So there are good things that come out of it as well. I wished it wasn't 45%, but in the whole big term of it, you've got to remember what else can come out of that.
You guys don't know, but she is the ultimate book sign queen. She built this up from her first book signing. She's there, she has a table, Jenny and she, they have posters, they have signs. Jenny mans the table, she walks the store and invites people over. You started with one book signing and they're so successful, it keeps expanding, but this has been a niche that she has rocked. So if you have any questions about book signing, I think Colin talked to her, showed up at one of her book signings, and now he has one at Indigo. So she is the queen of the book signings at Indigo and how to deal with that.
Jenny,
And I think
next year we maybe have to have you back to do a talk on
Yes,
book
yeah.
signing. I think that's
That
such
would
a
be
big
great.
question. I don't think we can answer it right now.
No.
So let's just, you and I
Yeah.
will talk about 1 month next, because we haven't had to do that yet.
No.
We'll talk about how you went from zero to planning a cross-country book signing tour.
That would be great.
That would be brilliant. Thank you. We
I
move on
would
to the
be in
next
the front
question.
row going.
Yeah. Next question. Aside from the cost of your time, which we all know is already a great cost, what things or expenses should someone expect to cover when in their publishing quest? So agents' fees, if you have photos in your book, maybe Theresa can talk about how to lay out things like cookbooks that are more complex. So layouts, photographs, editing, cover. Talk about some of the expenses you have. And I'm going to start with Danielle this time.
I did a hybrid publishing for my first book, and then I self-published the second book. So I was, fronting the costs of that expertise the first time around hybrid publishing, fronting the cost of having access to the contacts of a good editor, having access to the contents of a copy editor, proofreader, the distribution channels, how to do it, how to get an ISBN, you're paying for the expertise to open the door to a world that you've never been in before. So, all of that will cost money, $4,000 or $5,000, depending how many people you want editing it. If you have color photos, other graphics you want on the front. And then, part of your contract is you have to buy a certain amount of your own books. In my case, 500 books. That's another $6,000 in printing, just right there. And then, so then there's upfront maybe $5,000 to $10,000 in just getting a book out there.
Self-publishing.
No, that's a hybrid publishing.
That's a hybrid publishing.
Self-publishing, once I had the contacts and the connections, I could do it myself. I could hire a publisher and a graphic designer and get it done a little more cheaply, but
It's still in the thousands?
in the thousands, yeah. Printing a book is not cheap, and so there are hard costs in addition to your time that, it's an investment for sure.
It's like your own business.
It is, yeah. You're investing, yeah.
class, because
Okay,
she's going to talk about laying out photographs and whatnot.
The first time I did it, I had a contract, a very low contract. And then because I work for the publisher, there's a lot of creative services going on. Basic editing is done depending on the word count. So right now, the two editors that I know that I have a lot of respect for are $1,500 for 50 to 65,000 words. You've got typesetting, printing, cover art. Mine have usually cost around the 300 range. It can go up from there because they were also laying out stuff. Yeah, so probably $4,000, I would say easily. If I can recommend anything, I do a lot of book reviews, and so there's nothing sadder than having this book that you've read the little bio come in, and the cover art is bad. The font, you turn it over, the margins are wrong. You turn it over and they've chosen some weird Gothic thing for the back. You can't read the back. And then you open it up and they've got 1/4-inch seams and the lettering is too big. Or one time they picked a font that made my eyes spin. And it was a friend and I actually couldn't read her book. And that affects your reception. So paying for and taking your time with the cover art, making sure the person typesetting knows what the right fonts are, what the margin should be, it makes a huge difference. We all want to do it ourselves, but I've seen some disasters even from hybrid publishing companies, and I'm looking and there says, yeah, published by, and I'm going, oh my goodness, and how do I even review them, because I just like the book before I even get to the story. It looks like it was done in high school. How could this person be a good writer and put out something that looks like this? So it's worth finding somebody with some experience, look at the work they've done, make sure you understand, because once it's done, if you have to redo it, you got to pay for it all over again. But don't put it out cheap. Just wait, take your time, do trade services, whatever, but your cover art, your font, what you put on the back, and the way the book looks is the first calling card. It's like your business card. And if people don't like that, they won't even buy the book. I had books come to me for review that I thought, how am I going to get through this? And sometimes they were good stories, but they looked so bad from the outside that it actually affected my book review.
Yeah, a lot of what these ladies are saying, I know for Jenny and I, we went through Influence Publishing. We met up with them first. We did a workshop with them, which was very good because Jenny and I had never published books before. So I wanted to get every detail so I knew that these books were going to come out right, they were going to look good, but also I wanted to make sure that, that they were presentable. And then when I went to the meeting, to talk with Julie, then we were going over the figures. So Jenny and I had to pay $5,000 each to have them do their expertise, their knowledge, and everything. Then typesetting, everything, yeah. The cover, editing was included. Anything that went over the amount that was specific for the editing, then you had to pay that extra. And then we had, at that time, you had to print 500 books. So we had to pay another $5,000. So that was $10,000 for each of us. I will say though, and I totally agree with Marilyn, I couldn't agree anymore, the quality of our books, the covers alone are like your headshots, because I'm an actor, I think your headshots. We have so many compliments on the cover of our books, especially like Jenny's. People, when we're at our book signs, they just draw right to her. And same with mine, they draw right to her. One lady said, I'll just buy the book because I love the feel of it. And I went, you don't want to know what's in the book. But that is really important. And people have commented on the covers of our books, the fonts, the way it's been printed, everything about it. So it's really, really important. And it's like we were saying, that's your blood, sweat, and tears. That's your baby in these books. So you want to make sure that every specific thing, every avenue has been done right. But it does cost money. You don't want to have it done just, pardon my French, half-assed, because it's going to look and get a half-assed response to it.
Thank you. Theresa, you have a book that has photographs. I don't know if you've seen it. Have a copy?
You should show
Yes,
the book.
it's photographs and laying out a book.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just want to first say, go back to your why. Because if your why is that you just have a boil that you want to lance, you want to share and just get it out of you, because that's a healing thing. You know, in therapy, I have people write letters to people, and because then you can print it out at Kinko's, right? So it's like you don't have to spend thousands of dollars. If your why is, I wanted to create something that was going to be indistinguishable from a Penguin book or a Hay House book, or now, all these photos I happen to take. Now, again, that's a whole other story in it. If though I had had these photos done, there would have been, I think, it would have been, if I had like, I think it's like probably at least $1,000 a picture. Some people have these professional food stylists, it's food photographers. It would have been thousands, many tens of thousands just for the photos. So thank God I did them. I did all but one. So that one that you saw with the chia chips, I did not do. That one, my photographer who took pictures of us did. Part of this also is graphic designer is critical. Now we had one graphic designer, and then we ended up having to get a different graphic designer. I got lucky. It turned out, I didn't know this, but again, my friend who's in the publishing world and through connections, I didn't know this until much later, that the perfect person who did the graphic design, the typesetting, is apparently considered the best typesetter for graphic designer for cookbooks in all of Canada. I didn't know that, and she actually didn't gouge in terms of pricing. And all of my editors, everybody, we actually hired based on hourly, because I didn't want to be limited. I wanted it to be able to go through whatever we want. We wanted to do it right as opposed to just by numbers of words. So my editors, all of that was just strictly an hourly wage. This is a monster. This was, again, I wish I could say it was.
What's the final total? Do you know?
I don't even know, but it was many more than tens of thousands of dollars. We're probably, it's a lot of money. It almost cost my marriage, so that's the bigger cost. Not really, but it was very stressful because how much I put into, how much of me I put into, how much but I knew that this book was special, and it wasn't about me. It was this book that was coming through me, and I knew that it was there was a message, and that it was that my why was very big in terms of what I'm trying to help. People living with diabetes, people living with cancer, people living with autoimmune disease, seeing more and more kids with diabetes and the obesity crisis and that. And my dad, he had diabetes. He didn't have either his feet or low legs when he died. And more people who are suffering, and kids this is for me. I thought I was throwing myself in front of the train. I didn't think I was going to make it to 50. In 2 days, I'm turning 55. And I feel younger than when these women here, who happen to be here, it's amazing. When I met them, I feel younger and more vibrant, and more of me is here than was back when I was in my mid-30s. So for me, it was really, what is it I want to leave?
Yeah.
So can you give us a rough estimate?
No. No, I don't go there.
Okay.
I literally won't go there.
Okay, fair enough.
And but this is
But
actually,
what you're saying is hire someone who knows what they're doing.
you hire the people who are relevant given your why.
Yes.
Okay, fair.
My next book, when I write Disposable People, is not going to be in the tens of thousands of dollars. It's
Right.
going to be very different. I'm going to approach it very differently, and how I go about the promotion is going to be very different.
Fair.
But I want to point out this. This is a picture of the figs. But talking about the editors, you want to have editors that have chutzpah, but you want to also have editors who understand your soul.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's
Yes.
the essence. Yeah.
Okay? You want to have graphic designers who understand your soul. The first one didn't get it, and it was nightmare. It was a friggin' nightmare. It was crazy, and we were spending good money. Then as soon as this woman came in and she brought in some of her cookbooks that she had done, I just wanted to bawl. It was, because I mean, I was modeling my imagery after Olingi's work, you know, and when I then won, it was chosen, Eat Magazine chose the Yum as one of the 3 best gift picks for 2016, and there were 3 books, Yum, and Olingi's Plenty More was the second one. It was like full circle. But I saw her work, so you want to see people's works. I do recommend seeing work samples of the people and seeing the genres that they do. What does it feel? You have to go to that intuitive place of a big fat yes. If there's any uncertainty, do not start on a dotted line.
And that's actually a really good point. The person who, my editor for my memoir, understands my story without feeling sorry for me. Because a lot of people, oh, that's so great of you. That's not good feedback. I'm sorry. Once you get over that, you might be able to give me some real feedback. So they have to get you on a level and not, but get you emotionally, but not in any way pity you or condescending, or it has to be. I get you, and I'm going to be really straight and direct.
I'm going to challenge you.
I'm going to challenge you. That's actually really, really important.
You want that.
Okay.
If someone's going to be a yes person and everything is wonderful and good,
then it's not useful.
Don't
That's
hire
great with you. It's not useful.
Also, if they don't understand your voice, I mean, my first thing I always say is, I want the second book to sound like I'm having a cup of coffee with you.
Yes.
So I'm not worried, keep the commas down, I'm not worried about being super correct. I want it to read like I speak. And that was hard. That was hard for that editor.
It's a different way to edit.
It's a different way to edit, and we really had to work together on it because she wanted to give me the best editing. And sometimes the best editing isn't your place.
Your most
You
accurate,
still
the
want
most
it to be-
accurate editing isn't always the best editing.
That's
I'm
what I
gonna
mean,
just change
yeah.
what you say. Because you wanted the best editing, but you didn't want the most accurate grammar,
Right.
and you didn't want the
I
semantics
just wanted
and the
my voice
syntax
to
to
come
be
through.
perfect.
I wanted
Well,
my
but
voice.
and that's what I wanted with this. I wanted people that, especially in the autistic community, but also the general public, I just wanted them to feel like they were sitting across from me from the table, and Janet was talking with them,
Yes.
not at them, not telling them what to do, because a big part of this was to show people there's a light at the end of the tunnel with autism, and that it was positive and full speed ahead. And that's why I wanted it to be more of that relationship, and that's what I wanted the essence of the book to be about.
Yeah.
So, next question, we're probably going to get a different answer from each panelist.
Yes.
Very quickly, you have your completed manuscript in hand. It is fully edited. It is ready to go. What is the first step on the publishing path? So, first thing you should do with that. It's ready to go.
Send.
Champagne. I'm serious.
Book signing! It has no cover. It's been edited, but it has no cover. It has no table of contents. It has.
Oh.
What do you do first?
No
What do you do
champagne.
first? Theresa, what's the first thing?
really clarify who is your audience. Who are the eyes you want to see that cover?
Okay.
And who is the eyes and so, because that will help guide you with the
Perfect.
cover.
And then the next action you take is?
After you,
Have
yes,
you found your genre and your category?
Yeah, sure. What's your next action?
it's been fully edited?
Yeah, fully edited.
Yeah,
Covers on and everything?
No
Okay,
cover,
so
a
then-
manuscript in hand.
You
just
find,
measure
you gotta find the best graphic designers, graphic designer and who has that style.
Graphic
The
design.
graphic design, having a professional graphic designer you're talking about.
So cover,
and
The
graphic
cover is-
design.
formatting.
Yeah.
That's the
Cover
next
is
thing.
big, that's the first thing they look at. The cover and what you've got written on the back here. That is your front
Marketing blurbs.
and your back.
Marketing, the
It's
marketing.
very, very, very important.
Danielle,
But
your
you're-
next thing?
I mean, the back, yes, but I think like you had the back kind of at the beginning. You have that essence
Yes.
of what you were trying to say and the people you're trying to reach. I think, I don't know, for me, by the time I got to the point of it being edited, I had, and maybe this is because I was in a multi kind of dimensional package where I had access to the people I needed, but I had the access to the typesetter and the graphic designer, and that was all kind of happening, you know, at the same time. I sent it off to my editor. She was editing it while we were discussing what does the cover look like, editing the back, getting the You send it out to people to get reviews. That's another thing that, you know, to get the little blurbs that say, you know, I read this book and it's amazing and it changed my life, and you want to have those in the front. But I think those things kind of happen all at the same time, and yeah, you know, and this is something I would do more of next time, is to start sharing on social media channels. So you're excited about it, it's coming out, here's a little piece. What do you think, engaging with people about it?
Give them that trailer,
Do you know
that teaser.
what's interesting is I always write the table of contents before I start writing.
Right, so you outline
And I
it
think
first.
that's because I went to a writing workshop, I worked with a book whisperer, and understanding my audience, who I'm writing for, and what the goal of my book is, comes at the start for me. And so I actually kind of play around with the back blurb and all that as I'm going along. My challenge has always been the cover art. My first book, the editor and the graphic artist worked it out. I trusted them to do it. The second one, I hired a beautiful illustrator that I've been wanting to work with forever, and it was $600 and a complete disaster. And so I actually put my book away for 3 months, and I spent quite a bit of time searching the role for a watercolor artist. And I found this piece of art. It's called Listen to the Silence Underneath the Sounds in Czechoslovakia, and I reached out and bought the limited rights to use it for the cover. And then I went back to the graphic designer that I trust and like, that I worked with before, and he made the cover work. But yeah, the cover's hard for me, but it doesn't always, you don't always write and then do everything else. That is some people's process. But for some, because of the way I did my first book through a book workshop, I understood it was really important to understand what I wanted to do with this book. Yeah. What is this book about? And so often, I mean, my first book is mini bios, so table of contents is who I'm covering, which interviews are included. Second one kind of poured out of me, so every time I had a chapter idea, it went on the list. And when I felt like writing it, I did, and they all moved around in the editing process. But yeah, I saw this in a movie, and I'm going to do this one day. This lady fell into book writing in the war, and so what they did was Post-its, and they put a Post-it for every idea they had on the wall, and then they moved the Post-its around until they got the story in the order they wanted, and then they wrote it.
Yeah.
See? There's all kinds of ideas out there on ways to do this, but one day I want to write a fiction book, and that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be little Post-its on
And that's what we did with Julie. I went to this workshop too, because I'd never written a book before. I never thought I ever would. But we did this mind mapping, and it really blew my mind, because we went through like a step by step. I even have pictures of Jenny, and it was just really opened up and enlightened how I wanted the book to be. And I know with Jenny's book, right, Jenny, this wasn't the cover that you actually had wanted at the beginning, right? You had wanted your own work. She had a picture of Layla, her main character. She had these mouths side, which was beautiful, but after talking to Trista, who did the cover, it wasn't going to come out as well, just because of the way the material of the book wasn't at. So her and Jenny went through with this, and Jenny gets a lot of compliments with this cover of her book. So there's that to always take and consider in getting the help from others, and that weekend workshop and doing that mind mapping just set me straight ahead, and I knew what to do with my book then.
Thank you. Has anyone pitched at a conference? Their book? Pitched their book. Gone to a conference and pitched their book to an agent or a publisher.
No.
Sometimes yes, I know, that's why. Was it worth it?
Oh, yes, so this Steve Harrison was brilliant, that bestseller blueprint, and then there was this opportunity to go to Philadelphia for this 2-day amazing, for only $100 they end up only charging because it's like a sell up, but it was amazing, and it's also to get you to buy another big thing later, that's another thing. But it was incredible. It was 2 days, and a part of it, they had 4 of the top agents in kind of New York agents for books and that, and we had this thing where we would line up, and we had literally, I think, was it 1 minute or 2 minutes to have a pitch with each of them, and actually, particularly 2 of them. One of them is the top one in the U.S. 2 of them, though, really wanted my book. They really wanted to take it to do it, but I was literally at the point of almost, it was going to press, it was already there. But I still did it, and then I made that connection then. So I have these two people who, when I do a future book, they're very interested, and I can potentially do that. But just getting your foot through the door, because agents literally get hundreds, thousands of pitches a year, and you're lucky to have them even, have a moment with them. So that was fantastic, and having just clarity about what it is you're doing, what you want to do. One thing I will say that I forgot to mention about after the thing is done is getting endorsements by professionals. So who are the people who really speak to you? I did this dream list. I tried contacting. I still couldn't get through to Oprah Winfrey. But I tried all the top people, on the Jenners and also top people in health. And I actually got the leading gastroenterologist in the world who endorsed my book, who later then I was able to get on my show. But because the reason I got him was because I met him pitching that. It's like this one agent, and she was like, "Oh, I have a lot of people with gluten-free." And Alessia Fasano is one of my clients. Blah blah blah. Anyway, it was because of that, and then because I had her card and the connection. I said, he's my dream endorser. And she says, you never know, he's a nice guy. It took literally persistence. It took about a year, maybe, before I finally got the endorsement. But I got it. And then later I was able to get him as a guest on my show, which is like, when you get a rock star like that, it's crazy. But Dr. Joe Carnahan, Dr. Neil Barnard, one of the leading, people, vegetarian leaders in the world, physicians anyway. But what I did was I had this dream list, and so have no pride. You write to everybody, and you don't just write once, and you don't expect them to say yes or try to call. It's hard to get through because they have layers ahead of them. But just be persistent, and you'll get mostly no response or no, but thank you for whatever. But you just keep at it, and you just be fearless.
So when you did that, did you send them a sample chapter? Or
Oh yeah. Well, there's different things I did. So you send a letter, but then that's where you want to have the whole manuscript. That's what you're saying with the manuscript, and sent that in. I had it on PDF, and I was able to send a PDF. Anyway, but just it doesn't matter. If you know that this is something you believe in, you just put it out there. And some it took 2 or 3, like Neil Barnard. I think I did. I tried. The regular ways. I tried through LinkedIn. I did it through Facebook. I would just write and say, oh, I don't know if you've heard, another one. I got Jules Shepard, right, the leading celiac blogger in the world. And I've been 12 friends. She was there on my show too, and so was Jill. Anyway, see, but remember I said, it's about relationships.
Yeah.
And so what I would do is I would speak in those letters. You have touched my life in this way, and I think you might appreciate this, and it would mean the world to me if you would, be willing to take a look at it, and I couldn't believe how many yeses I got. And then having Dr. Sandra Cabot in her thing, she ended up writing a super long one. Yum is a masterpiece. She wrote like 2 or 3 times in it. For her, one of the leading, integrative physicians who just was ahead of her time, that's just like, it just meant a lot as a human being, and so I would just build on those relationships too, and kept them updated.
I like how you said though, be persistent, and you didn't say it exactly like this, but be shameless.
Yeah.
That's how I would put it. Be shameless. You want something, just go ask for it.
Yeah.
And be shameless.
The worst thing to do is say no or not look at and not see it.
No.
But you give them. I tried recently to get Abdul's bar on my show. I did finally get through to his person, whatever. It's like they said what day, and they said that's not going to work. I said no worries. I just let him know how much he's meant to me and what he's been to the world, and who knows, down the road we might. I'm not going to. I'll that I'll try again.
Yeah, and that's important to do that, because I know with Jenny, when we found out she was autistic, there's a couple called Samantha and Bernard Kaufman. They had a movie out called Sunrise, A Miracle Continues, with a couple of well-known actors in it, and it was all about their son who was diagnosed with autism. I reached out to them because I was a single parent at the time, and I was just about trying to figure out every support I could get with Jenny. They contacted me back. They sent me tapes. They sent me books. They sent personal letters. They also are in my book. They wanted to be a part of it. They wanted their name in there and what they helped for us, but also what they're doing for other people. So you make those connections, and they want to be a part of it, and they want to be part of your book. So that's.
I just want to say one thing that's happening around here is that you said you've written your book, what now? The list was forming while she was doing her book. The connections were made before she started her book. You don't write a book on its own. You can't sit there 8 hours a day, most of us. So while you're writing your book, you're thinking about who's going to write your endorsements, what's the cover going to look like, who am I going to work with? You have time, but it all, it's like a bunch of threads coming together, being woven into a thing. It's not just you write a book, and then you do a cover, and then you find your endorsements, and then it's really a very integrative process that you really just have to trust your instincts, build your relationships, and see what pays off. My first book, I struggled with endorsements. The second one, it was like, oh yeah, sure, I'm sending out sample chapters. Should I really write this? Randy was one, said, yeah, you should write this. Okay, all right, I'll write this. You know, people are there for you, and your community supports you. But no, writing is never just done very linear. It's got all kinds of side trips that all seem to, it's like all the roads into the city, and one day you've arrived at the city and the box arrives and you get goosebumps and pop the bottle of champagne.
Thank you. That's actually a really nice place to wrap up. So I just want to acknowledge that I have not asked all of the questions on the cards because there are so many questions. But what I'm going to do is this. If there are questions that I have not asked, some of them are quite simple. There's one, for example, that asked for good publishers for poetry and children's books. There was a children's book illustrator. I'm going to just put those on Facebook over the next few weeks in the YVR Authors. So I'm just going to post a question from someone. Do you know any good illustrators for children's books? And if anyone knows, just go in and answer it. And if you are an illustrator for children's books, stand up now.
Jenny's an illustrator.
Yeah, there we go. We have an illustrator, Jenny. Yes, thank you. So yes, and there are other questions. There are some big questions, like how do authors develop a base to market to? That's an entire 1-hour talk. I will find someone to do that talk next year, September and on, and we will have that as a topic next year, because that's something I think that we could go on, like a lot of these questions, we could go on for an entire hour. So that's what I'm going to do. Some of them I'm actually just going to bring in speakers and we're going to do talks. Others I'm going to post them on Facebook so that people in the community can come and answer them for you. Sound fair? And if you have anything else that didn't get answered today that you want to hear about, please let me know. I'm always open to ideas, speakers, whatnot. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you learned.
And a free draw.
And draw. Oh, the draw, yes. You have the book. Yes, pass them up. Thank you, Theresa. Any more?
Melody?
Should be revved up now.
It's all dairy free, it's all free of it's a lot of things.
I just want you guys all to know that Julie says she wishes she were here and she's been watching. So Julie, everybody wave to Julie.
Okay, are we ready? We're going to unfold that one. Okay, we just have to the Jurassic Kick one.
We're doing a draw for Teresa's book.
Jason Zamoto?
Yeah.
Woo!